Think about the last time you decided to completely overhaul your life.
Oh, that's a dangerous question.
Right. Because it almost always happens at like 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, doesn't it? Right?
Exactly. Every single time.
You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the house is just completely quiet, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you are hit with this massive, overwhelming wave of motivation.
It's intoxicating, really.
It totally is. You tell yourself, tomorrow, everything changes. I am going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to run 5 miles. I am going to meal prep for the entire week.
Learn conversational French. Start a business.
Yes, you're going to draft that massive business proposal before breakfast. And it feels so real in that moment.
Well, yeah, because it is this classic rush of pure potential. I mean, lying there in bed, you haven't actually encountered any physical friction yet.
Zero friction.
Right. You are interacting purely with an idealized version of yourself. And of course, that feels incredible.
It feels like a literal superpower.
Yeah.
You set 4 different alarms. You arrange your running shoes perfectly by the bedroom door.
Maybe buy an expensive leather-bound planner online right then and there.
Oh, I've definitely done that.
Yeah, okay.
Go to sleep, genuinely feeling like a newly minted superhero. And then
reality hits.
yeah, the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. on Monday morning.
The worst sound in the world.
It is pitch dark outside. The floor is freezing cold. And suddenly, all that superhero motivation just like evaporates into the freezing air.
It's gone instantly.
Completely. By Wednesday, you're hitting snooze 6 times, you haven't even looked at the running shoes, and you're eating a stale pastry in your car for breakfast.
Yeah, we've all been there.
But the worst part isn't actually the failure itself, is it? It's the shame that follows. We sit there commuting to work just thinking, what is fundamentally wrong with me?
Why do I keep failing to change?
Exactly.
And that's the tragedy of it. We immediately internalize that failure as a deep character flaw. The assumption is always, that we lack discipline or we lack willpower.
Or that we're just fundamentally broken.
Right. We treat personal transformation like it's a test of moral fortitude. And if you fail, well, it means you are weak.
But what if that entire paradigm is just totally wrong?
That's the big question.
What if the reason we fail to change has absolutely nothing to do with our character or our willpower or our worth?
It's a huge shift in perspective.
It really is. What if we are just approaching the mechanics of change with completely the wrong tools? I mean, to put it in physical terms, it's like we are trying to build a 60-story skyscraper without a single blueprint.
Just pouring concrete directly onto muddy grass.
Exactly. Pouring it on the mud and then standing there crying when the whole structure collapses in a light breeze.
Because it's an architectural failure, right? Not a moral one.
Yes.
We treat personal growth like it's this temporary mood state that we just have to sustain through pure force of will, rather than treating it as a rigorous structural science.
And that profound shift in perspective is exactly the foundation of today's deep dive. So welcome, everyone. This is a highly anticipated double feature masterclass.
I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. Our mission today is to decode the literal algebra of becoming. We are going to explore 2 pivotal, incredibly dense chapters from a comprehensive system called mathematics.
Which basically translates to the mathematics of transformation.
Right. And it's a beast of a text.
Oh, it absolutely demands a lot from the reader, but the payoff is just immense. It takes these abstract, often really highly emotional, slippery concepts of personal growth and
subjects them to a rigorous architecture.
Exactly. It strips the emotion out of the failures so you can actually look at the structural mechanics of your life.
So we are focusing on 2 specific pillars from the text today. First, we'll examine chapter F, which is all about the atom. This details how to perfectly engineer the absolute, irreducible starting point of any change.
Because you cannot build the skyscraper until the foundation is flawless.
Right. And then we're going to jump to the other end of the timeline with chapter E, the harvest.
Which is so crucial.
It really is. It covers how to successfully complete a cycle of change and actually extract wisdom from it, rather than just grinding endlessly until you burn out.
And that's the behavioral trap most of us are stuck in, isn't it? We either fail to initiate correctly, which leads to that Wednesday morning collapse you described.
The stale pastry phase.
Exactly. Or if we do somehow manage to push through, we never know how to stop, culminate, and harvest what we've built. We just keep moving the goalposts until the system breaks.
We all have goals. We all have habits we desperately want to build, relationships we want to change, creative projects we want to finish. But, if you rely on that vague Sunday night motivation, you are mathematically guaranteed to fail.
It's just a matter of time.
So today we're looking at a literal, step-by-step formula to map out your own transformation, prevent energetic burnout, and stop that exhausting cycle of starting and quitting.
We should probably clarify immediately what the text actually means by mathematics.
Yes, please do. Because I'll be honest, when I first saw the word algebra associated with personal development, my brain immediately seized up.
A lot of people have that reaction.
I thought of, like, high school calculus, solving for x, cold, rigid numbers. How on earth does that apply to the messy reality of human emotion and habit?
It's a completely natural reaction to the terminology, but mathematics isn't about numbers, quantities, or solving equations in the traditional sense. It's really a pseudo-algebraic mapping system.
Okay, what does that actually mean?
It uses the structure of mathematical notation to map the relationships between the invisible variables in your lived experience.
What kind of variables are we talking about here? Because, I mean, human behavior isn't exactly as neat as X and Y.
Sure. The variables are things like your internal effort, the time required, your focus, the environmental friction, the energy available to you, and the context you're operating in.
Okay, I can see that.
Think about how algebra works. If you write out an equation, like 2x equals 10, the equation shows you how these elements interact to produce a specific result. If you get 12 instead of 10, you don't say, oh, x is a terrible, undisciplined number.
Right, you don't shame the number.
Exactly. You just say, the calculation was unbalanced. And mathematics does the exact same thing for your life. It posits that transformation never happens in a vacuum. It happens in the specific interaction between your internal state and your external context.
The text actually uses real mathematical notation, though, right? Like
Yeah.
division symbols, plus signs, brackets, but not for arithmetic.
Precisely. To give a very basic example from the framework, it might write the concept of curiosity over support, like a fraction, curiosity divided by support.
Okay.
But how you read that equation is your internal curiosity is filtered by or constrained by the external support you have available in your environment.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
So if your internal curiosity is incredibly high, but your external support system is 0, the fraction gives you a very small result. The mathematics makes the invisible dynamics of your frustration visible. You aren't failing because you lack drive. You are failing because the denominator, the support, is starving the equation.
That is incredibly liberating. It completely removes the moral judgment from the process. If my habit fails, I just need to look at the equation and figure out which variable was improperly weighted.
Exactly.
And the text grounds this entire mathematical language inside what it calls the 11-step operational flow. This is the macro structure of the entire mathematics framework.
Which is a huge departure from how we usually operate.
Right, because when we try to change our lives, almost all of us operate on a 2-step flow. Step 1, get a good idea. Step 2, take furious action.
Idea, followed by completely unstructured, highly emotional exertion.
And then usually total exhaustion.
Exactly.
But the text outlines 11 incredibly specific sequential stages of a complete transformation cycle. I want to briefly map the whole territory before we zoom in today.
Yeah, giving the lay of the land is a good idea.
So the text breaks these 11 steps into phases. The first phase is awareness, which is steps 1 through 3. Defining the starting point, establishing the tension, and finding synergy.
Right.
Then there's friction, step 4, where you define the physical container of the work. Then comes experimentation, steps 5 through 7, which is the actual planning, executing, and processing of the action.
The messy middle.
The messy middle, yeah. Finally, you hit integration, steps 8 and 9, and new awareness, steps 10 and 11.
We usually skip from step 1 straight to step 6, the execution. We buy the furniture before we've even surveyed the land, let alone poured the concrete.
Exactly. Today, we are focusing deeply on the concrete, which is step 1, and then we are looking at steps 8 through 11, which is what happens when the action is finished and you actually have to move into the house you've built.
To see if it actually stands up to the weather.
Right.
If that concrete is poured incorrectly, the furniture doesn't matter. The house will just sink into the mud. Which is exactly why Chapter F insists that we must start by isolating the absolute smallest unit of change.
Chapter F, the event atom. This is step 1 of the 11-step flow. Define the starting point.
The event atom. In the text notation, it's represented by 3 distinct symbols that we really need to decode. It's a gear, a white circle, and a black circle.
Okay, gear, white circle, black circle.
The foundational concept here is that the event atom is the irreducible starting point of intention. It is the microscopic seed from which the entire massive 11-step cycle grows.
So it's flawed.
If the single atom is structurally weak or unstable, the entire skyscraper you try to build on top of it will eventually shear and collapse under its own weight.
Reading this section actually made me realize that almost every single failed diet, abandoned creative project, or, broken resolution in my past wasn't an execution failure.
It wasn't.
No, I always blamed my execution. I thought I just didn't work hard enough. But the reality, according to this text, is that my event atom was unstable from the very moment I conceived it. I was trying to build on top of a cracked foundation.
We all do it. And Chapter F provides 3 highly specific diagnostic properties that separate a structurally sound event atom from a weak one. You can actually use these to test your own goals right now.
Let's do it. What's the first property?
The first property is clarity over vagueness.
Let's test that. A weak atom, the kind we usually create on a Sunday night, would be something like, I want to get my life together, or I really need to be healthier.
Which perfectly describes 99% of New Year's resolutions.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a vague wish. It's a general direction, maybe pointing north, but it completely lacks a specific, measurable destination. You cannot execute on healthier. What does that even mean?
Right. Is it cardiovascular endurance? Is it sleep hygiene?
Is it mental peace? A strong event atom transforms that vague wish into a specific, bounded identity claim with really clear behavioral parameters.
So what does that look like?
Instead of, I want to be healthier, a strong atom is, I am someone who moves their body for 30 minutes every single day.
The psychological shift there is just massive.
Mm.
It moves from an abstract, subjective concept to an objective, observable reality.
Yes.
At 10:00 p.m., you know definitively whether you moved your body for 30 minutes or not. There's literally no gray area. But you don't necessarily know if you were healthier today than yesterday, so your brain can't reward you for it.
Exactly. The brain needs a clear boundary to cross to register a win. Without that boundary, you're just drifting. So the second property is presence over projection.
Man, this is the one that really stung when I read it.
It calls a lot of people out.
It really does. A weak atom relies on projection.
Right.
Like something like, I will become a writer someday, or I'm going to start a business next year.
Notice the tense of the language there. I am going to. Projection pushes the required identity into a hypothetical future.
It's always tomorrow.
Right. It essentially signals to your nervous system, hey, we aren't actually this thing yet, and we don't have to bear the responsibility of being it today. We will deal with it later when the conditions are perfect.
And of course, the conditions are never, ever perfect.
Never.
It's a massive procrastination mechanism disguised as ambition.
That's a great way to put it. A strong atom forces that identity into the present moment. Instead of, I will become a writer, it becomes, I am a writer building a daily practice right now.
So you are claiming the identity in the present tense, regardless of your external accolades.
Yes. You aren't waiting for a publishing contract to grant you permission to call yourself a writer. You are claiming the weight of the identity today. And that fundamentally alters how you behave in the next hour.
Because if you are a writer now, well, you have to go write.
Exactly.
And that ties directly into the third diagnostic property, embodiment over abstraction.
Yes.
A weak atom stays entirely in the conceptual realm. For instance, I want to be a better partner, or integrity is very important to me.
Those sound wonderful on a bumper sticker or, a corporate values document, but they don't mean anything in a physical behavioral sense. They lack physical weight.
Right. How do you actually do integrity at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday?
You don't. You can't. A strong embodied event atom translates that abstract concept into a lived physical behavior.
So instead of, I want to be a better partner, the embodied atom is,
I am a partner who actively listens without interrupting.
oh, that's good.
Or instead of, I value integrity, it becomes, I am someone who completes the tasks I commit to. Do you feel the somatic difference when you say those?
Totally. The strong atom can be physically observed. It can be practiced in a quarter second of interaction. It actually has a physical footprint in the real world.
Exactly.
So if we want the cycle to succeed, we have to engineer this starting event atom with absolute microscopic precision. It has to be incredibly clear, anchored in the present tense, and physically embodied.
Right.
But the text introduces a major structural twist right after this. It argues that simply engineering a perfect atom isn't enough to guarantee success.
No, it's not.
You also have to mathematically calculate how you're going to show up to execute it, or you will run out of energy before you even hit step 3.
Yes. And this brings us to what might be the most strategically brilliant framework in the entire metamatic system. It's the concept of the three modes of representation.
These are the three symbols we mentioned earlier, right? The white circle, the black circle, and the gear.
Those are the ones.
The text offers a very stark warning here. It states that if you apply the wrong mode of representation to a specific variable or task, you are absolutely guaranteeing energetic debt, structural collapse, and burnout.
It is a mathematical certainty.
Let's break these modes down because this completely changed how I look at my daily to-do list.
Let's define them carefully. The three modes are essentially the three different interfaces or energy signatures through which you can engage with any given task, habit, or transformation in your life.
Okay.
The highest tier mode is the person mode, which is represented in the text by the white circle.
The white circle. This represents the pure, authentic, unfiltered self. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Person mode is your direct conscious agency. It is you showing up authentically, deeply invested with all your vulnerabilities and core beliefs active.
Wow.
It requires your full, unfiltered presence. You must use person mode for the heavy lifting of a human life. Fundamental identity shifts, defining your core values, creating deeply personal art, or having incredibly vulnerable conversations with a loved one.
So if I sit down to finally write that novel I've been dreaming about, that requires person mode. It's basically the core of my soul pouring onto the page.
Yes.
But the text is very clear that the energetic cost of this mode is astronomically high, isn't it?
The energetic cost is immense because it requires total alignment of your conscious and subconscious fabrics. You cannot delegate person mode. You cannot put it on autopilot. It demands a massive caloric and psychological burn.
Okay, so if I can't be in person mode all the time without burning out, which makes sense, what is the second interface?
The second interface is the persona mode, represented by the black circle. This is strategic, role-based representation.
You know, when I first read Persona, my mind immediately went to being fake or being manipulative, like wearing a deceptive mask.
That is the common negative connotation, for sure. But metamatics frames it as an essential psychological tool. It is context-specific compartmentalization.
Oh, interesting.
You aren't being fake. You are intentionally highlighting a very specific subset of your authentic skills for a specific environment while temporarily muting the rest of your personality.
So it's kind of like putting on a uniform.
Precisely. Think of a surgeon walking into an operating room. They don't bring their worries about their mortgage or their quirky sense of humor or their political opinions to the operating table.
You definitely don't want them doing that.
No. They adopt the persona of the surgeon, hyper-focused, clinical, precise. Or think of adopting a disciplinarian persona when you need to enforce a morning routine on yourself when you are just so tired. You are still you, but you are playing a specific character required by the situational context. The energetic cost here is medium. It takes sustained energy to maintain the boundaries of the role, but it doesn't require the soul-deep, exhausting vulnerability of person mode.
That makes so much sense. It's protective. It protects that core energy.
Exactly.
And what about the third mode?
The third mode is the principal mode, represented by the gear symbol. This is system-level automated transformation.
The machine. The algorithm.
Yes. This mode is activated when you build a rule, a habit, or engineer a physical environment that operates entirely independently of your moment-to-moment presence or motivation.
Give me an example of that.
For example, setting up a calendar system that automatically blocks out your phone notifications during deep work hours, or setting up an automatic financial transfer to your savings account every payday.
You don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. The ongoing energetic investment here is incredibly low. You expend energy once to build the system, and then you just let the gear turn on its own. It runs you.
Now, here's where this framework just blew the doors off my understanding of why habits fail. The text points out the catastrophic danger that it calls mode mismatch.
Yes, this is huge.
If you try to use the raw, vulnerable person mode to manage every single mundane detail of your daily structure, your schedule, your diet, your email responses, you will bankrupt your energy reserves in a matter of days.
It is a recipe for absolute systemic burnout. I mean, imagine waking up every single day and having to use your deep, authentic, vulnerable soul energy just to debate whether or not to brush your teeth.
Oh my.
Or what exact time to check your inbox or whether you should go to the gym.
You would be completely depleted by 9:00 a.m.
Exactly.
But that is exactly what most of us do because we want a transformation so deeply. We really want to get fit or write the book we think we have to muscle through every single microscopic step of the process, using our core identity.
We demand our person to do the exhausting, repetitive, administrative work that a principal system was explicitly meant to handle. If we look at how this applies practically, it relieves an enormous amount of psychological pressure.
How so?
Well, you do not have to bring your authentic, full, raw self to doing your taxes.
Thank goodness.
Right. You do not need to be deeply present to organize your inbox or to lay out your workout clothes. You can simply let a principal handle the structure. You build a rule. At 8 p.m., the clothes go on the chair. The gear turns.
And it's done.
Or you put on the persona of the administrator for 60 minutes on a Friday afternoon just to clear your desk.
You systemize the mundane with principles. You handle social or professional contexts with personas so that you actually preserve the deep, raw energy required to be present in person mode where it genuinely matters.
Exactly. Like when you sit down to create your art, or when you are connecting with your children, or when you are defining your true life goals.
The text provides a beautiful structural example of mapping this out correctly. If your event atom is about building a daily writing practice, your commitment to the craft, the why you are doing it, must be held in person mode, the white circle. But your daily structure, the fact that you sit at the desk at 6 a.m. should be relegated entirely to principal mode, the gear.
Because if you wake up every day and try to make your schedule a matter of deep personal willpower and identity negotiation, you will fail.
Every time.
The system must carry the structure so the person can carry the art.
I just want to highlight that sentence.
Wow.
The system must carry the structure so the person can carry the art. That is the secret to consistency right there.
It really is.
Okay, so we have engineered our event atom. We've selected the correct mode of representation so we don't burn out. But the text argues that an atom still needs fuel. A perfect engine still needs combustible material to actually move forward.
An empty structure, no matter how mathematically perfect, cannot survive the friction of reality.
Right.
The text connects the event atom back to a foundational diagnostic framework it calls the 4DP. This stands for target, truth, totally, and title.
Target, truth, totally, title.
Yes. For an atom to survive the long journey of the 11-step flow, it must be deeply fueled by these 4 pillars.
Let's break these down by looking at a failure, because I think that's the best way to understand it. The source material gives a great case study of an atom that completely dissolved upon impact with reality. The failed atom was simply, I could be an entrepreneur. Let's run that statement through the 4DP diagnostic. Why did it mathematically fail?
Well, it failed on every single metric. First, target. The target was incredibly vague. It was just a generalized desire for financial freedom or autonomy with no specific trajectory.
No clear direction.
Right? Second, truth. There was no honest assessment of the current reality. The person didn't evaluate their actual risk tolerance, their current skill set, or whether they genuinely wanted the daily grind of running a business, rather than just the aesthetic of being a founder.
Oh, that's so common. We want the aesthetic, not the grind. Third is totally right.
Yes, totally. The commitment level was weak. It felt more like a social should, like maybe all their friends were starting companies rather than a deep internal must.
And fourth, title.
Exactly. The identity was never actually claimed. Look at the language of the atom. I could be an entrepreneur. It remains safely hypothetical.
It also violated a core rule of mathematics by jumping straight to the macro scale without building any microstructures.
Yeah.
I mean, you do not just wake up and become an entrepreneur on a Tuesday.
No, you definitely don't.
A structurally sound, fully fueled atom would have been scaled down dramatically, right? Something like, I am an experimenter testing one specific business idea per month for the next 3 months. That is an atom you can execute, measure, and fuel.
And to fix these weak, poorly fueled atoms, the text provides a rigorous 5-step quality assurance protocol. It calls them the 5 refinement passes. You run your raw intention through these 5 filters to harden it.
I want to walk through these because I think this is the most practical tool in the entire chapter.
It's extremely actionable.
Let's say my raw goal is I want to be a more patient parent. Pass 1 is the tense check. We discussed this earlier. I have to shift from a future aspiration into a present identity. So it changes to, I'm a parent who practices patience today.
Perfect. Then pass 2 is vagueness elimination. We have to replace the abstract value of patience with a concrete, observable behavior.
Because patience is unmeasurable.
Exactly. So you refine it to, I am a parent who takes a 3-second breath before responding to a tantrum. Now, it is a binary mechanism. You either took the breath or you didn't.
I love that. Pass 3 is ownership verification. This one is insidious, honestly. You have to ask, are you doing this to satisfy an internal standard, or are you secretly seeking external validation?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is. A weak version of a career goal might be, I am a recognized successful professional. But that goal relies 100% on how other people judge you. You don't control the outcome.
Not at all.
The refined, internally owned version is, I am a professional who delivers zero defect work. You completely control that standard.
Yes. Then we reach pass 4, the energy test.
Okay, what's that?
This relies on somatic intelligence, the physical wisdom of the body. When you speak your refined event atom aloud, what happens to your physiology?
Literally, in your body.
Literally, does your chest expand? Do you feel a surge of nervous but authentic aliveness? Or does your body literally contract? Does your stomach tighten?
Like it feels heavy.
Exactly. Does it feel heavy, performative, like a burdensome obligation you were dragging around? If your body contracts, it means you're trying to force an atom that lacks the truth pillar of the 40p. The body knows when you are lying to yourself.
Wow. And then we hit pass 5, the fear edge check. The text asks a very pointed question. Does this atom make you slightly uncomfortable?
It's a crucial check.
And honestly, when I read this, my immediate reaction was to argue with the author. I thought, if I have a great goal and I'm perfectly comfortable with it and I have a spreadsheet detailing exactly how to achieve it, why is that a bad thing?
Right. Why introduce friction?
Exactly. Why do I need to introduce fear or discomfort into my process?
It is a very valid pushback. But the text distinguishes heavily between maintenance and transformation.
Okay.
If you are perfectly comfortable with a goal and you know exactly how to execute every step, it means you are not actually standing at a threshold of transformation. You are simply operating within the well-mapped boundaries of your existing comfort zone.
So it's not actually growth.
Exactly. It's excellent for daily maintenance, but it will not produce a new iteration of yourself. Transformation, by its very definition, requires stepping from the known territory into the unknown.
So there's no fear.
If there is no fear, no edge of uncertainty, no lingering question of, can I actually pull this off, then the event atom isn't demanding enough of you to forge a new identity. You're just writing a very elaborate to-do list and disguising it as personal evolution.
Wow.
Change requires a crucible.
If there's no edge, there's no growth. That's a hard truth. Okay, so let's zoom out. We have done the exhaustive work of step 1. We have engineered the perfect event atom. It is clear, present, and embodied. We have calculated our modes. We are using principles for the structure and person for the soul.
It has survived the 5 refinement passes. It is fully fueled.
Right. We drop the atom into the 11-step flow. We take action. We move through step 4, friction. We navigate the messy middle of experimentation in steps 5, 6, and 7. We are in the thick of doing the work. And then, what happens?
Well, eventually the action has to stop.
Which bridges us beautifully across the timeline into Chapter E of our sources, the harvest.
Yes. We shift from the meticulous architecture of the beginning to the critical psychology of the ending. Chapter E points out a tragic reality of high achievers.
What's that?
Most people are capable of taking massive action. They can sweat, they can bleed, they can put in the grueling hours of work. But they have absolutely no idea how to actually finish a cycle and absorb the nutrients of what they just did.
They either cross the finish line and immediately declare victory without reflecting, or, more commonly, they just never, ever stop grinding. They stay on the treadmill forever.
Which brings us to step 8 of the operational flow, temporal culmination. In the mathematical notation, this is represented by an hourglass symbol.
I love the visual of the hourglass. It inherently implies that time is a bounded factor. There is a specific measurable moment when the sand runs out.
Exactly. Step 8 is the precise temporal moment when the intended result is actually achieved. And it is crucial to understand that culmination is not when you feel perfect.
Right.
It is not when the work is over forever and you can retire to a beach. It is simply the moment when this specific isolated cycle has reached its natural temporal boundary.
The source material highlights 2 massive systemic mistakes people make right here at step 8, the moment the sand runs out. The first mistake is under-recognizing.
This is the classic trap of the modern high achiever.
Oh yeah, you hit the target, you get the promotion you worked 3 years for, you run the marathon, and instead of pausing to actually acknowledge the magnitude of the achievement, you immediately pivot and say, okay, what's next? Time to run an ultramarathon.
It is the hedonic treadmill applied to personal growth. They never actually inhabit the victory, which means the nervous system never registers the success.
And the second critical mistake is overextending. This happens when you refuse to acknowledge culmination and you keep working past the natural endpoint of a cycle.
Yes. You push into the zone of diminishing returns, where every additional hour of effort yields exponentially less result, leading directly to systemic burnout. You simply do not know how to say, this iteration is enough.
So how do we mathematically know when we have hit temporal culmination? Because my brain will always tell me I could do a little bit more.
Well, the text provides 3 specific markers of culmination to look for. Marker 1. The original intention is met. This requires you to look all the way back to your event atom from step 1. Did you do what you specifically set out to do?
So if my defined intention was to build a sustainable daily writing practice for 7 consecutive days, and I wake up on day 8, the intention is met.
The cycle is over. It may not have been perfect, but the temporal boundary was crossed. Marker 2. The pattern is now visible.
What does that mean in practice?
You have done enough repetitions inside this cycle that you are no longer guessing at the mechanics. You can clearly see what works, what fails, what times of day your focus peaks, and exactly where your internal resistance flares up. The data is in.
Got it. And the third marker?
Marker 3. The next iteration becomes obvious. Because you can clearly see the pattern, you naturally know what variables need to be adjusted for the next cycle. You don't have to invent a completely new goal out of thin air. The data from this cycle naturally dictates the parameters of the next one.
This shift right here, recognizing step 8, is a profound psychological turning point.
It is arguably the most important shift in the entire framework. Step 8 is the exact moment transformation shifts from the active state of becoming to the settled state of being.
Becoming to being.
Yes. When you are in the chaotic middle of a cycle, steps 4 through 7, you are actively becoming a writer, becoming healthier, becoming a better partner. The energy is highly kinetic.
Right.
But at temporal culmination, you must deliberately pause, let the kinetic energy settle, and recognize, I am this thing now. The capacity has been physically built.
And if you skip step 8?
If you skip step 8, you are mathematically doomed to run horizontal cycles forever. You keep exerting massive effort, but you never actually let the transformation solidify into your baseline reality. You never actually level up.
You are just a hamster running faster and faster on a wheel, completely exhausted, wondering why the scenery outside the cage never changes.
It's a bleak picture, but it's true.
That is such a chilling realization.
Yeah.
Which leads us into the actual harvesting phase of the framework. Steps 9 and 10, knowledge-directed creation and redualization.
Once you have recognized culmination, you must extract the value. You move to step 9, symbolized by the circled, plus sign the mathematical operator for synthesis. This is knowledge-directed creation.
So what are we creating here?
The framework asks you to take an inventory. What did this specific cycle of effort actually create in the real world?
And the text divides this inventory into 2 distinct categories: tangible artifacts and intangible capacity. Tangible artifacts are the easy ones. They are the measurable, physical proof that the cycle occurred. The data sets, the journal entries, the completed spreadsheet.
The source material uses an ongoing example of an archetype called the traveler, who completes a 7-day cycle of behavior change. At step 9, the traveler lists their tangible artifacts: 7 completed physical training sessions, 10.5 hours of focused creative work, and specific biometric sleep data.
It is the empirical evidence of the work. But the far more important category is the intangible capacity, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the new invisible internal architecture you have built through the friction of the cycle. It is the new psychological momentum, the heightened baseline of focus, the newly discovered clarity about your own emotional boundaries.
You have to actively name and claim these intangible creations, or they will rapidly slip away back into the unconscious.
You have to write down, I created a higher tolerance for frustration.
So we've named the artifacts. Then we hit step 10, redualization. In the mathematical notation, this is symbolized by the circled X. The concept here is returning conceptually to the starting point to reflect, analyze, and refine the data.
But the crucial instruction, the absolute game changer, is that this must be done entirely without self-judgment.
This is where the mathematical framework proves its ultimate value. You are instructed to observe the behavioral data of the cycle like a detached scientist evaluating a chemical reaction, not like a harsh moral critic evaluating a personal failure, pure pattern recognition.
Yes.
But let me challenge this, because it sounds great in theory, but in practice. If I set an event atom to go to the gym every day, and my data shows I skip Thursday and Friday to watch television, isn't self-judgment exactly what is supposed to keep me accountable? If I don't feel at least a little bit guilty about failing, won't I just become complacent and keep skipping the gym?
It's the most common fear we have about dropping self-judgment,
Great.
that without the whip of shame, we won't do the work.
Right.
But the text argues the exact opposite. Shame is an incredibly metabolically expensive emotion. It drains the exact energy you need to initiate the next cycle. Furthermore, shame obscures the data.
How does it obscure the data?
When you say, I skipped the gym because I am a lazy, undisciplined failure, you have essentially shut down the investigation. You've rendered a moral verdict, but you haven't actually learned why the system failed.
You just punish yourself and learn nothing about the actual mechanic.
Exactly. The text gives a brilliant example of the recursive self operating correctly during step 10.
Let's hear it.
The traveler reflects on their 7-day cycle and notices a recurring point of failure. The observation is, resistance to the daily practice is highest in the first 60 seconds. Once physical movement actually begins, the psychological resistance dissolves almost immediately. Therefore, the gap between deciding to move and actually moving is where the battle is lost.
Notice the complete lack of shame or moralizing in that observation. The traveler doesn't write in their journal, I am so lazy and pathetic because I hesitate for 60 seconds every morning.
No. They simply note the mechanical reality of the friction. It's an observation of physics.
And because the observation is free of emotional static, it immediately yields a practical, structural solution for the next cycle. Solution for iteration 2. Reduce the temporal gap. Tomorrow's practice requires the physical mat to be set out the night before, and the first physical movement must be pre-decided.
It's so elegant, it treats human behavior as an engineering challenge rather than a test of moral purity.
I was trying to conceptualize this, and it essentially works exactly like updating the software on your smartphone.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Think about it. You ran an app that is the transformation cycle. While the app was running for 7 days, it naturally generated background bug reports.
Yeah.
That is step 10. You review the data and notice where the app crashes, where it gets laggy, where it drains the battery. And instead of yelling at the phone and calling it a bad person, you just read the bug reports, write a patch for the code to fix the lag, and apply the update before you open the app again.
That is the perfect mechanistic analogy. You are actively patching your own behavioral code based on the empirical, emotionless data generated from the previous cycle. You are evolving your own algorithm.
Which brings us to the grand finale of the process. Step 11, comprehensive comprehension. This is the absolute peak of the entire metamatic system.
Step 11 is represented by a star symbol. It is the highest vantage point of the cycle. It asks a profound, expansive question. What universal principle did this highly specific, isolated experience just teach me about the nature of reality?
That is a huge question.
It is. The text breaks this final comprehension down into 3 distinct levels of holistic integration. This is how we move from isolated, messy events to deep, transferable wisdom.
Level 1 is the level of events. It is the simple statement, I understand what happened. You acknowledge the basic chronological facts of the cycle.
For example, I attempted to practice daily for 7 days. I succeeded for 5 days, and I realized my evening sleep schedule is highly erratic.
Then you move deeper to level 2, the level of patterns. I understand why it happened. You start connecting the cause and effect dots.
Right. I see that when my daily structure, my principal mode is solid, my creative output goes up. But when I neglect my physical recovery, the entire system destabilizes, and I fail. You see the hidden mechanics.
And finally, you reach level 3, the architectural or universal level. I understand the universal principle of transformation. You abstract the specific personal lesson into a fundamental law of nature.
For example, realizing from this tiny 7-day experiment that all sustained growth requires the deliberate integration of complementary opposites, like intense effort paired with deliberate rest filtered through an appropriate environmental context.
You move from learning a mundane lesson about setting out your gym clothes to grasping a fundamental law about the nature of balance and reality. It's breathtaking.
And this is where the text brilliantly ties the entire 11-step flow back into a broader conceptual model it introduced earlier, called the spiral of becoming.
Right. The spiral of becoming was described as a continuous loop. Awareness leads to friction. Friction leads to experimentation. Experimentation leads to integration. And integration results in new awareness. Which starts the spiral over again at a higher elevation.
The 11-step flow we just unpacked is simply the formalized, mathematically mapped version of that organic evolutionary spiral.
Oh, I see.
Steps 1 through 3, engineering the atom and preparing the tension, are the stage of awareness. Step 4, defining the physical container, is friction, where the ideal meets reality. Steps 5 through 7, planning, executing, and processing, are experimentation.
And steps 8 and 9, temporal culmination and knowledge creation, are integration.
Exactly. And steps 10 and 11, redualization and comprehension, are the arrival at new awareness, preparing you with better data for the next higher loop of the spiral.
It is a perfectly closed loop.
Yeah.
The map perfectly describes the territory, but the author leaves us with a very stern warning at the end of this chapter, don't they?
They do. The text explicitly warns that you cannot formalize what you have not personally lived.
What does that mean for the reader?
You cannot simply memorize these 11 steps, draw the mathematical symbols in a notebook, and expect your life to magically transform.
Right, you can't just think your way out of it.
The conceptual mapping is useless without the physical friction. The architect, the analytical part of you that maps the change and calculates the modes, must first be an artisan.
The artisan, the
Yeah.
one doing the work.
Yes. The physical part of you that actually does the grueling work, feels the muscle tear, and experiences the frustration of failure. The mathematics of transformation only work if you actually put your bare hands in the dirt first.
You cannot draw a meaningful blueprint for a house that you refuse to ever walk inside and experience. The lived experience provides the raw data. The metamatic structure simply organizes that data into wisdom.
Exactly. The map is not the journey, but a good map ensures the journey isn't wasted.
What an absolute masterclass of a framework. We have covered an enormous amount of psychological and structural ground today.
We really have.
Let's synthesize the mission we've taken you on. If you want to achieve real, sustainable transformation in any area of your life, you have to stop relying on the emotional, fragile high of midnight motivation.
But it won't last.
You have to stop treating failure as a moral defect. Instead, you must engineer a flawless foundation, an event atom that is incredibly clear, locked in the present tense, and physically embodied.
And you must constantly calculate your energy expenditure. You must know exactly when to deploy the deep, vulnerable energy of your person mode, when to protect yourself by adopting a strategic persona, and when to entirely outsource the heavy lifting to an automated systemic principle to avoid energetic bankruptcy.
And just as crucially, when the action is done, you must deliberately harvest the ending of your cycles. You must recognize when the sand in the hourglass has run out at temporal culmination.
Yes.
You must actively name the tangible and intangible capacities you created. You must analyze your failures and friction points without a single ounce of self-judgment during redualization, patching your behavioral code like a software update.
And finally, you must elevate those specific lessons into universal principles in comprehensive comprehension.
You don't just act and forget. You initiate, you analyze, you execute, you harvest, and you mathematically evolve.
Beautifully said.
So as we wrap up this intense deep dive into the architecture of change, we want to leave you with a final lingering thought, a question to carry with you into your week, directly applying the structure we've explored today.
We invite you to examine the blueprints of your own life right now.
Think about the biggest, most recurring point of frustration in your life today. That one habit you can never seem to stick to, the creative project that constantly drains you, or the goal that keeps slipping just out of reach every single year.
Right.
Is it possible that you aren't actually failing at the execution of the task? Is it possible that you aren't fundamentally lazy or undisciplined or morally broken?
Consider this. Are you simply demanding your precious, finite, highly vulnerable person mode to do the exhausting, repetitive, administrative work that a cold, automated principle system was explicitly meant to handle?
Are you burning out your authentic soul every single morning on a mundane task that just requires a simple, unbreakable rule?
It is a question that completely changes the paradigm of how we manage our own potential.
Take a step back this week. Look at the invisible architecture of your life. Stop blaming yourself for bad execution. Stop treating failure as a character flaw and start building better blueprints. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Start engineering your atoms, and we will see you next time.